Are furry artists going to be replaced by robots?
Look, something's happening in AI.
Of artificial intelligence in their craft.
You see the AI artwork that won a state fair. Yup, I did. Oh my god. The art community is in shambles.
We're delving into an intriguing but perhaps somewhat unsettling topic that's been gaining traction in the art world: artificial intelligence and the potential dangers of it in the realm of visual art. In the last couple of years, it has very quickly gone from being a fantasy technology in sci-fi films to a real threat to the jobs of millions of people. As AI continues to revolutionize creativity, enabling remarkable feats in generating art, we can't help but wonder about the implications it carries, especially within unique and expressive communities like the furry fandom. We need to address the ethical and creative challenges it poses, and how these challenges intersect with the vibrant world of furry art. And well, how easy it's becoming to be fooled. The entire excerpt I just read was written by ChatGPT, and this work I'm showing on the screen was AI generated. And this one, and this one. Is there a real threat here to artists? Is AI image generation becoming too good? What are the actual implications here? These are all questions that I want to try and answer today, but in order to answer them, we need to look back. This Persona Does Not Exist is a website that was developed by AlphaFox in early 2020, and features an infinitely scrolling grid of randomly generated furry headshots. This website is notable because it predates the current era of incredibly detailed language interpreting and capable AI image generation models we have now, and was one of the first examples of machine learning being trained on furry artwork at a large scale. The dataset used was 55,000 safe-for-work images from the infamous Blue Hexagon website, and the model was trained for 32 days. The result is interesting. A lot of what the site puts out is very, very clearly AI generated with incorrect anatomy, weird color mixing, and most obviously, large AI artifacts. That said, it does occasionally put out work that is somewhat passable and doesn't look totally terrible. With that in mind though, there is a problem. All the work that this model was trained on is publicly accessible on the internet, sure, but publicly accessible is not necessarily the same as publicly available for use. See, in the terms of service of the aforementioned website, and I quote, "When you upload content via our services, you grant us a non-exclusive, worldwide, royalty-free, sub-licensable, transferable right and license to use, host, store, cache, reproduce, publish, display, publicly or otherwise, perform, publicly or otherwise, distribute, transmit, downsample, convert, adapt, and create derivative works of that content." This may read to most people as a license that gives full control over the work, but in reality this is simply referring to the basic rights the site needs to host the content without infringing on copyright. And because of safe harbor protections, if someone erroneously submits something they didn't make to the site, as long as they take it down if the correct owner requests it to be taken down, they're fine. With all of this in mind, although the wording used in the terms of service is transferable, this does not actually mean that by downloading images from the site that you have a license to use them in any capacity. However, there is an additional problem on this website. As it has positioned itself more as an archive, a lot of people will post other artists' work without permission. Some commenters accused ARFA of disrespect and asked for the choice to opt out of the project. Others complained that their work had been uploaded without their permission in the first place. That said, the legal implications of this still aren't super clear, as although the machine learning algorithm that drives this Persona Does Not Exist was trained using copyrighted work, the new work that it creates is all entirely machine generated, and hence does not have any copyright, since copyrighted works need to be generated by a person and only by a person, and we'll touch more on this shortly. And that's only on the legal side. On the more moral side of things, I wouldn't doubt that AlphaFox didn't have any dubious intentions when they were making this website. It does seem like a fun, hacky project more than anything, but at the end of the day, work was taken from an art gallery website without the artist's permission to be used in a project that is effectively being trained to create images that look like their drawings. One could argue that it's not much different from an artist being genuinely inspired by another artist's work, but not being able to afford them, taking time to produce work that is similar out of passion, and then eventually selling that work, which many people would agree is not infringing on rights. A key difference here, though, is that the AI models are built using this work rather than being inspired by it. ArfaFox has been cooperative and was paraphrased in a Gizmodo article as saying, quote, "He's more than willing to take an image down from This Persona Does Not Exist if it clearly copies an original character, but he says that he has yet to see credible evidence of that." We'll talk a bit more about the possible impact on artists and the ethics of this shortly, but first, we need to turn time forward and see where we're currently at as of writing. Stable Diffusion is a text-to-image generative AI, much like Midjourney or DALL-E 2, where you simply type in an image prompt and a combination of a language model and an image model work together to create an image based on your prompt. What makes Stable Diffusion interesting is that it is open source, meaning that other developers have the ability to utilize Stable Diffusion's model and build plugins for it, or new datasets to train it with. This is important for something like furry art, as the majority of images in general datasets are real photos and paintings, often made just to document where they were taken, whereas most furry artwork is digitally produced and is invariably made by an artist with intent. Although there are millions of artistic photographs in the dataset, they still mesh fairly well with most of the more mundane things included in general datasets, but the same can't be said for furry artwork. This is where AI models like Furry_Epoch4, Cross Kimono, and others come into the picture. These are models that, much like This Persona Does Not Exist, were trained exclusively using digital furry adjacent artwork, and with much more robust models that we have access to as of writing in 2023 versus what was available in 2020. The results are fascinating. Although they aren't perfect, there is a very noticeable difference in the quality of these highly specialized models as opposed to using a more generic model. Frankly, if you're not pixel peeking these, to an untrained eye, they look passable or even good as regular images. Now, this isn't limited to just furry artwork, as specialized models in other niches will also generally produce much better results, but I think universally one of the biggest things here across the board is that these specialized models are strikingly better than what you might expect at a glance, and produce images that can, for better or for worse, be substituted and go unnoticed by most people. Now that we understand where AI image generation currently sits, we need to address what is most important: the ethics of how these models are trained, and how they're used. Contrary to what some AI enthusiasts might say, there are legitimate concerns about not just the legality, but the morality and the ethics of these training models, let alone what they output. Let's tackle the legal side of it first. Most current training models are built off of a simple premise: scrape as much data off of the publicly accessible internet as possible, and even from archives, and use it to train large neural networks in their specific field. This is a problem, and it's simply because of copyright law. Copyright law in the United States, and many other countries for that matter, dictates that a person's artwork is the sole property of its creator unless otherwise specified by its creator, regardless of whether said work is originally digital or analog, and where it's been posted. Although you will almost certainly never get a complaint for this, simply using someone's artwork as a wallpaper without permission is a form of copyright infringement. Where this becomes undoubtedly problematic, though, is when money gets involved. Very few artists, photographers, and musicians are going out of their way to issue DMCA violations or cease and desist letters to random end users that just like their content, even though they're 100% within their legal right to do so. Where artists do typically draw the line is when someone utilizes their work without permission or compensation to build or create a commercial or otherwise monetized property. This is exactly what companies like Midjourney and OpenAI are doing with their products. GPT is built on a dataset pulled from the internet at large. This includes people's blog posts, journalistic articles, messages on forums, transcripts, and much more. The issue is that almost all of this is considered copyrighted work. Things like scripts and excerpts from video transits, when used in full, could be argued as a form of copyright infringement. And when apps like ChatGPT and Midjourney are charging monthly fees for their service, it could be argued that these applications are fundamentally basing their business model on serial, repeat copyright infringement. What makes it even more bizarre is that although these scrapers that are grabbing images and text from the internet can be argued as infringing copyright, the work that these learning models produce isn't actually itself protected by copyright. Quote, in February, the US Copyright Office, quote, refused to grant a copyright for a piece of art made by AI, saying that human authorship is a prerequisite to copyright protection. That case is now being appealed to a federal court. However, because the AI's creator thinks that, having programmed the machine, he should be able to claim copyright over all the works that it produces. This isn't the first time that a non-human author of a work has been denied copyright. This famous image was actually taken by a monkey, and PETA attempted to establish that animals can be copyright holders because of it. However, in April 2018, the appeals court ruled that animals cannot legally hold copyrights and expressed concern that PETA's motivations had been to promote their own interests rather than to protect the legal rights of the animals. This is still technically a legal gray area, but the precedent has been set that large language models and image generation models cannot retain the copyright used in their images since it is not created by a human, even though the models themselves are potentially infringing copyright. However, since most of these datasets are curated by people, they can absolutely be the offenders of copyright infringement. The main problem is that without seeing the actual training dataset itself and linking it to a given model, there's actually no way legally to verify that copyright was infringed here. In many cases, this could still lead to prosecution if people pursue legal action, but it's not guaranteed. Almost everything that I mentioned in Chapter 3 is explicitly legal in nature. However, there is also an entire side to this that is purely just a question of morals and ethics. We can argue all day about the legality of the situation, but something being legal or illegal does not automatically tie it to being right or wrong. The reality is that you can be breaking the law while doing a morally righteous thing, or vice versa. In this case, there are a bunch of moral questions that are frankly unclear and need to be argued. Personally, and this is just my opinion and not an objective fact, I think that as a general rule, using AI image generation as a means of conceptualizing an idea or helping visualize something with an artist is fine. It is a good tool for helping those who aren't as artistically affluent in describing ideas. That said, I think that too often it is relied on by these people as an actual substitution for an artist in many works where an artist's precision and interpretation are valuable. And without that additional input, there can be granularity in detail or vision that is lost. More importantly, many artists have dedicated their lives to their work, and to have a machine learning algorithm swoop in and use their work against them is, in my opinion, quite scummy at best. It's undoubtedly problematic and is a big part of why I and many others are strongly opposed to utilizing AI in commercial projects, especially in its current form. If training all of these models was done using the consent of all parties involved, there would be almost no moral issues whatsoever. But that's just simply not how the work is done. This isn't to say that these programmers aren't talented or don't deserve jobs, but the datasets are using what is effectively stolen work, and that is undoubtedly an issue. It especially becomes an issue when we consider that many of these models actually are able to recognize specific artist styles and imitate them, sometimes with shocking levels of accuracy. I'd show you on the screen, but out of respect for these artists, I'm going to neglect doing so. It doesn't really matter whether it's just filling in a background or giving you a character portrait either. Using AI as a tool to help you out with a large project is one thing, but putting completely unedited generated art is oftentimes problematic because people just often won't notice that it's AI generated in the first place. This was probably the most bizarre part of researching this video. It's not surprising that there are people defending AI image generation, but what was surprising was the bizarre and often unhinged ways people would go about defending it. A good example of this is the subreddit r/defending AI art. A common term that gets thrown around is that AI image generation is a sort of free competition to compete with artists, or users claiming that artists are, quote, greedy for getting upset that AI image generation might be taking their jobs. The first take is somewhat meaningless and akin to saying that walking is a type of free competition with cars. You're comparing apples to oranges. And on the greedy take, many artists struggled to get jobs even with a degree before AI image generation became a more mainstream phenomenon. It's a job that is often super underappreciated, underpaid, and a difficult market to break into. To many people, these may seem really bizarre or possibly even nonsensical, but it's very real. Quote, "They can't be a greedy piece of shit without consequences. because they make good art anymore. They also will no longer have such a strong grip on who gets what art with their insane prices, etc. To imply that the entire fandom is filled with artists that are based on greed is misleading at best and a downright disprovable lie at worst. There are definitely circles of people that are greedy and don't actually care much about the work as an art form, but that's not the majority of artists. As a matter of fact, this very video's thumbnail was made by my artist PC Doodle, who has spent years perfecting their artwork and was still treated poorly in spite of this in most of their previous business relationships, both with other YouTubers and with independent publishers. Artists are already having it tough in the internet era, and to try and somehow turn the tables and make the artists the bad guys here when they are the victims of blatant art theft and poor compensation is ridiculous. This is unfortunately very much a new internet age problem that we are facing. On one hand, AI image generation itself is a very interesting technology with real-world applications, but on the other, it poses a legitimate risk to artists and has been severely mishandled in its current form. First off, repercussions need to be placed on models that are profiting off of data scraped from other websites without permission, especially if the original artists did not consent to it. I definitely think that it is okay to use these generators in a non-commercial capacity, but they shouldn't be taking jobs from artists when the artists never consented to their work being used in the first place. Next up, there needs to be regulation put in place that prevents machine learning models from utilizing datasets that weren't given voluntarily. Old writing is fine because it's in the public domain, but fanfictions from Wattpad aren't. Although, I don't think you'd want to use Wattpad in your training data anyway. Last, we need to normalize having a rational discussion about this topic in the first place. Part of the reason why there has been so much turmoil is because it has become too much of a shouting contest. AI-powered things are here to stay, and that's fine, but we need to make sure that it's done in a way that is ethical, and I do think that middle ground will be found with time. But until that time, we are at a seriously dangerous point in time right now where the lines between artist-made art and AI-made images aren't super obvious to a lot of people anymore. What do you think? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below, and I might make a follow-up video discussing some of them. Also, a big thank you to my team, my channel members, and to my patrons for making all of this possible. People like Minecraft Trackers, General Spyro, Cypher, Ice Shredder, and Senor Borboletto are the reason I can do this full-time and afford to pay my team. Thank you so much, and see you in the next video.